Okay, so what we're going to tie here is 4 versions of the Brassy. It's a good way to cut your teeth on wire-bodied flies. So we'll do just a basic standard Brassy with some peacock herl. We'll do the counter rib Brassy, a double counter rib, and then we'll finish up with a guide's choice Brassy, which is really nothing more than a simple way to tie the fly. So I'm just going to start my thread about a bodkin width behind the eye, if I can get it going there. I'm going to use a 3-turn tie-in. I'm going to keep it up front. If you're not good at performing this or whatever, you can actually just take the thread all the way back, bring it back forward, and then tie in from there. So you'd already have a thread base. But as you get better, doing it this way is pretty easy. I'm going to tie my wire in on the side, and pull it down so it sits underneath, and I'm just going to gently pull the wire until it just lines up with where I started my thread. And a big part of making nice wire bodies is the underbody. And so the nicer you can make your underbody, the better your fly is ultimately going to look in the end. And so I'm just going to take my time. I'm going to wrap back until I get to about the barb. And then I'll come back forward. We're tying this on a size 12 times 1 long, so this is going to be a rather big Brassy, but I've caught fish on 12 size Brassy. You can, I'd say typically they're probably tied around 16 or 18. Now you can go either direction, but when we start our body, we want that first turn of wire. You're gonna keep it directly above and around the shank. And as you come into your second turn, what you want to do is start to angle your wire towards the back so that it's ever so slightly touching and sliding off the previous wire wrap. And you can take your thumb or your nails and kind of scooch it together. And we're just going to continue to do that as we work this guy forward. Just making sure that each wrap is nice and even and consistent. The fewer lumps you have on the underbody, the nicer the body's going to turn out. And just take some patience. Size wire I'm using here is a BR size from UTC. A lot of people call that a Brassy size. Excuse me. If you get down to 14s, 16s, 18s, you're going to want to move down to a small or extra small size wire. And really you can wrap this in either direction. Since there's not going to be any additional body material or whatever, so wrapping clockwise or counterclockwise is fine. And we're going to bring that all the way up. And what I'll do is I'll swing my wire to the front side. I just hold it straight up, and then I can bring my thread down and around at an angle to capture it. Everything turned out pretty good except that last little bump right there, or the first little turn. Looks like it slid off my thread base. That's okay. It's not going to be that's not a deal breaker. Now to get rid of this wire, one of the best methods you can use is just a helicopter. So pull down on your thread with a little tension and just twist until it pops off. And then for the thorax, what we're going to do is I'm going to use a couple strands of peacock herl. Actually, I'll tell you what, I'm going to put a third one in just in case one breaks. And we want to get the tips reasonably lined up. And we're going to cut off about an inch on the tip side. It just that section of peacock herl is typically super brittle and tends to break more. So as we tie this in going back, I'm going to come just into the wire body a little bit, not very far. And then what that does is it'll ensure a seamless transition. I bring my thread back forward. Now I'm just going to use 2 of these guys. And an effective way to help keep these from breaking is to twist the herl together. You don't want to over twist. If you over twist, they tend to break. But it reinforces it, and it helps make them a little more fluffy. Oop. So every turn or 2, I'll add a few more wraps, or I'm sorry, a few more twists into the fly or into the herl. Okay, sorry, I was just holding that in place. Next, I'm going to bring that peacock herl down and around to the front side of my thread again. I can just put a couple of turns over. I want to draw it to the back so that I've now trapped it 2 directions, to the front and to the rear. And all I got to do now at this point is I can just take my fingers one at a time and pop the herls off. And if you don't have one that breaks, you can just go ahead and pop that guy off and save it for another fly. There we go. Kind of groom it a little bit. Just go back and forth a few times just to build a small head. And really that's it. Very easy fly. Like I said, it's a good way to learn to do your basic wire bodies without getting into all the complexities of something like a copper john or wire body stonefly or something like that. Just whip finish. Snap that off. And that's it. That's how you just kind of tie a modern version of a standard brassie. And so next we'll do the counter rib brassie. It's tied just a little bit different. So let's do that next. Okay, so the counter rib brassie, the second version. I'm just going to do my 3-turn tie-in. I'm going to put the extra wrap in just to make sure it holds in place for the jam knot. Clip that out and get about 7 inches of wire. Again, I'm going to tie this in. I'm going to tie it in on the tire side just because I tie counterclockwise. If you tie clockwise, you'll tie it in on the far side and allow your thread to pull it underneath. Either way is fine. It really makes no difference. I'll start that out a little bit front so we can go over sliding it back underneath. And we're going to slide that wire until it meets up. This time what we're going to do is we're going to take our thread back forward to where we originally started. And now we're going to start to wrap. And again, you can tie this clockwise or counterclockwise. You want that first turn nice and perpendicular to the fly. And all what's going to change this time is we're going to angle the wire to the front and let it slide off the previous wrap that way. And we're just going to do this until we get back to the barb. Oops. Went a little too far there. I got the little moths out tonight. We're trying to enjoy the last few days of summer. Now, if you get some gappage in your wire here, especially with it just being metal to metal, you can really just take your thumb or your nails and scooch them together. Typically, if I need to do that, I try to do that about every 5 turns or so. the more you practice wrapping wire bodies, you probably don't need to do that as much. And it's a little bit harder if you have a thread base down for your underbody. It doesn't like to slide as much. And you know, as far as colors are concerned, you can tie these in a ton of colors. It doesn't have to be copper. We're just kind of sticking with the original. Okay, so once I get my wire back to the barb, as I bring my wire underneath, I'm going to angle it forward at about a 45-degree angle, bringing it up, and I'm going to continue to wrap in the same direction, putting in a counter rib across the body. Spacing on this, I typically try to go about a bodkin width in distance. If you need to test it, you know, do it every wrap or so. Also, if you have a rotary feature that you like to use on your vise, you can put a half hitch in here or a whip finish in right there, and and then use your rotary function. And just take your time. It's not a race. Now, I'll go ahead and pull the wire to the front, down and around, bringing it on the front side, crossing it over a few times. Now, as you can see, where the thread starts on the bottom, my wire rib or counter rib starts basically right on the far side for me. So it's starting just slightly to the back side on the bottom of the shank. And then when I end it, I try to end it in the same place roughly. So I mean, I'm pretty close there. It's not perfect. It's not a deal breaker, but this way you get full turns around. Now I can wrap my thread back. Put a little tension on it just to make sure. Pop that off. And then I'll just come one turn in behind. There we go. And you can play around with what you want to use for the thorax. So for this one, I'm going to take some, what I've got is some Simperfly ice dub. Now this stuff is quite a bit longer than regular ice dubbing. Something like this ice dub from Hairline, I'll show you real quick. It'll be much shorter, much thinner and finer as far as length is concerned. And this is probably a little bit more friendly to do a direct style dub to it, to the thread. So you can actually cut this down if you want, or you can direct dub it. Either way is up to you. Matter of fact, actually, you can just tie this long stuff in, and then pull your thread forward out of the way, and then just use it kind of as a body wrap. So I'll go ahead and give it a twist every time I come around, just to make sure I've got it in place. But it's something different to use. It's going to kind of give a little spikiness to it. You don't need much. Play around with how much you want to use. This is probably just a little bit more than I wanted, but yeah, that's just too much. Let's get that off there. There we go. And stuff like this, try to use your fingers to pull it off instead of cut it. It gives it a little bit more of a natural look. These longer fibered dubbings can be a little bit trickier to use. I honestly don't use the Simperfly ice dub all that much. I like it, I just don't use it all that much. It's a little bit longer than I typically like, and therefore it takes a little bit more prep work, so I kind of avoid it sometimes, I suppose. But anyway, now you've got little ice dub counter rib Brassy. And it's a decent little fishing fly. It's going to have a little bit of movement up front, a little more so than the peacock herl. So that's another way you can tie the Brassy, adding a cool effect. Okay, let's do the double counter rib on the next one. Okay, let's do the double counter rib. It's going to be a combination of the last two flies that we did. So again, I'm going to start my thread bodkin width behind the eye. I'm going to do a 3-turn tie in. I'll put the extra wrap in just because it's my jam knot. I want to make sure it holds. Next, I'm going to grab some black wire. You can use whatever you want or whatever you got. However you're trying to make it look is what you can use. I mean, it's totally up to you. And we're going to tie the black wire in, going to the back, leaving it on the bottom side of the shank. I've had people ask why I tie them on the bottom side of the shank. Well, for the little extra weight that it does add, it puts it so that it helps keep my hook point riding down in the water. And then 2, when you go to finish off the fly, you have a starting and stopping place. Ideally, that's going to be at the same point in the fly. And it just looks a little odd if it's on the side or something like that. So that's why. Not sure the fish is going to really care so much, but as a fly tyer, I notice it and I care how my flies look, especially if I'm tying for somebody. I want them to look nice and presentable. Okay, now that we've brought our thread back forward, I'm just going to go ahead and move that out of the way. Next, I'm going to take my copper wire, or whatever color wire you're wanting to use, and tie this in basically directly up front, allowing my thread to pull the wire down underneath. Put about 3 turns in, and I'm going to bring my thread forward. I want to make sure you don't pull your wire out here. It's really easy to do. And now we're going to, again, angling our wire slightly forward. Wrap back until we meet up with the black wire. This is where it can kind of get really fun, especially kind of like I'd mentioned before. Brassy is a good way to learn these real simple techniques, but you start taking these into things like stoneflies or even caddis, things of that nature. You can come up with some really neat looking patterns that may fish really well for you. And you start adding the little extra effects like this, you're more likely to entice people to give you the hit the like button on your post or things of that nature. And so that's always fun. Showing off your work. Okay. Now as I kind of close in on the back here, I'm down to about my last wrap. I'm going to free up my black wire. I'm going to do my last wrap. And as I come around, I'm going to have those 2 wires join at the same spot. You want to kind of keep them tight together. That part can be a little tricky. Angle it at a 45-degree angle going forward. Again, trying to make sure that you've got even spacing. That's always a big deal. You know, really work on making sure your counter rib spacing is even. It just makes a nice presentable fly. And then we'll bring it forward, trying to get 4 to 5 turns in. And it's a little bit more difficult with the double counter rib. Getting them even and getting them to land at, or finish at the same point. The goal here is to have 4 to 5 turns. So I'm going to back my thread off just a little bit, so that way when I come around to my last turn, I can pull it forward. Don't be afraid to back your thread off. It's not a bad thing. Don't think you have to add more. Sometimes taking it away is better. Try to even that up before I tie it off. That's pretty good. And now we just got to catch both of these in at the same time. And I'll work my thread to the back. I'm going to jump over my last counter rib to make sure I have a seamless thorax area. I can trim those out or twist them off. So to finish this one, just for something different, I've got some muskrat here. You could use, if you're going natural, I mean, you can use really whatever you want. Squirrel, rabbit, beaver, really just whatever you got or whatever you want to do. It's just, you play around with it and figure out what you like. I mean, if you want to use ice dub or peacock curl, go for it. I mean, it's really just whatever kind of look that you want and all that good stuff. And so we'll just use some muskrat just for the sake of using something different. Muskrat's great dubbing. I really enjoy using muskrat actually. Got just a tad bit more on there. Plus, it's easy to take off because the fibers are very, very short. It can also be kind of a pain in the butt to learn to use. I'm going to jump my thread forward to behind the eye, and now I'm going to wrap back, keeping my turns touching tight, just to build the little bit of a head there. And now I can whip finish coming forward. And that's how you do, I've got a few fuzzies I'm trying to keep out of the way. That's how you do a double counter rib wire body. And in this case in particular, a brassy. So, all right, easy enough. Next we will do what's considered by many to be a guide's choice brassy, and I'll explain why it's a guide's choice brassy. All right, so the guide's choice brassy. This is probably the easiest way to tie a brassy out of all of them. The reason many consider this to be what's known as a guide's choice fly is because of the simplicity of it. It takes very little thread. You can actually save on material if you get really good at it. It just doesn't take long to tie. Plus, you can actually tie these riverside really, really easy. So, again, with my 3-turn tie-in for my jam knot, I'm going to take my wire, put it underneath, pull it till it comes forward. Okay, and I'm just going to open spiral wrap very, very quickly. Take my thumb, scooch it together. Uh-oh, my fly's coming loose. Don't want that. Of course it's going to happen on a video. That's what happens on videos. We roll with it here. Put about 5 turns in, scoot it forward. Scoot it forward. Just until you get the length to where you want it. Just gonna watch out for that hook point. Okay. Now before we do anything with that, you want to take some well, this glue's getting all tacky and sticky on me. Yikes, time for some new glue. You want to take some super glue or UV resin or whatever and just give the body a coat this isn't going to work super well because that glue is really gummy. I didn't realize it gummed up on me so bad. Give it a second just to dry. Now when you helicopter this off, what I like to do is I like to pull straight up and very tight and just pop it off. And wherever it snaps off is fine. And then you can, most of the time what they'll do is they'll just dub this, because dubbing you don't have to carry much, it's lightweight, it's easy to handle, especially if you're tying on the water. I'll just use some peacock herl just for the sake of using it, because I have it handy. Just tie back in to the fly. I'm not even going to put a third one in. Just going to let it roll. If they break, they break. Bring it to the front. Tie over a couple of times. Reverse it. Always reverse these kind of materials, especially feathers and anything of that nature. It really helps ensure that you're capturing the material well, and then we can just whip finish, or you just use a couple half hitches and glue the fly shut. And so if you get good at tying these guide choice brassies, you could probably tie, I don't know, you probably get them down to a minute and a half if you practice a little bit. So they can be tied very, very, very quickly. Had to add an extra very in there. So anyway, cool. Well, that's the end of week 2 for basics to build on. We're going to come back to some of these techniques here in a few weeks. So give some of these methods practice them a little bit so that you can get familiar with them, and then ultimately put them in your tool belt and dial them up when you need to. So happy tying, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you in week 3.